Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's show. As usual, we have a special guest who I will introduce to you in a little while. But a little bit of news before we get there. Our council election preparations are in full swing. We've been producing leaflets for our candidates around the country. There's mine. So if you're lucky enough to live in a ward where there's a Scottish Family Party candidate who is delivering leaflets, then you might find something like that coming through your door before too long. Quite a few people have been getting in touch saying, is there going to be a candidate in my ward? Will I be able to vote for the Scottish Family Party? Well, the answer is either yes, or yes, there could be if you decided to be that candidate. So it's still not too late if you would like to be a candidate, to give people the opportunity to vote for what they believe in this forthcoming council election. So it's not too late to come forward, even to be a sort of active campaigning candidate, to have a leaflet put together for you. I mean, we could still do that. It's getting towards the end of that time. But if you are wanting to do that, there's still time for you to get on board. So if you're interested in doing that, email chairman@scottishfamily.org, chairman@scottishfamily.org, and he will be more than happy to explain about the process and to help you through it if you decide that's something that you want to do. Even if you haven't got any time for campaigning, or you don't want to make yourself a leaflet, anything like that, you don't want any sort of public profile out of it, but you just want to give people the opportunity to vote for the Scottish Family Party and make people aware of the party in your area or within your council area, then that's a very valuable thing you can do for us as well. So all that needs is filling in the forms, handing them in, and that really is it. I mean, you might want to do some campaigning or help another candidate. That'd be great. But even if you haven't got time to do any of those things, still just being a candidate, filling the forms in, getting the Scottish Family Party on the ballot paper is a very valuable thing to do. Again, if you're interested, if you think that's something that you would like to do, then email chairman@scottishfamily.org. How many candidates are we on at the moment? I think our current list is 60 odd, maybe going on 70. So who knows how many we'll end up with. We didn't think we'd have anywhere near this many people wanting to be candidates. So it's been great. It seems like every time we go for a meeting, there's people who say, okay, yep, I'll do it. I'll be a candidate. So we end up a few more coming forward. So that is very encouraging indeed. While we're on the subject of meetings, there are a few meetings this week. Let me just check my diary. Tomorrow evening, there is a meeting in Greenock. We haven't had a meeting in Greenock before. So if that's your neck of the woods, that would be great if we make it along. Now, on Thursday, this is unusual for the family party. We've got two meetings going on at once. I'm going to be in Dundee. That's in the Queen's Hotel in Dundee. That's at 7:30 on Thursday. And also on Thursday evening, there is a meeting in Ayr. Now, the meeting in Ayr, it isn't actually technically a Scottish Family Party meeting, but our Southwest branch chairman is going to be leading proceedings. And it's a sort of information night to share with parents and other interested parties about some of the things going on in schools. They're going to talk about the sex survey and sex education, etc. So that's been publicised in the area as, say, an information evening for parents. So if you're in the Ayr area, do go along. I'm sure that will be fascinating as well. Now, there's also a lunch in Coat Bridge on Friday, and I think there's a lunch in Glasgow on Saturday as well. So do make it along to those. Now, what else have we got before the next live stream? I think that's it. Now, if you want more details about those meetings, do look at the pinned post on Twitter or Facebook as well. I don't think it's on YouTube yet. I need to do that. But it's on Facebook and Twitter, all the details for those meetings. It would be great to see you. Now, as usual, I've got a couple of news items just to talk about. These are issues that have come up before, but they've been back in the news again this week. The first one is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Now, this is an issue that you're probably thinking you've never heard anyone else talk about it apart from myself, from this sort of perspective. Because as far as the Scottish Parliament is concerned, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child is just a political football. The SNP use it to say, look, the Westminster government won't let us implement it into Scots law. That just shows how we should be independent. Whereas the unionist parties are saying, no, it's not a problem. Yes, we can. And they talk about it's just a political football about the Constitution. What not a single MSP has expressed any insight into whatsoever is what difference this is actually going to make in Scotland? And the answer is the difference it makes is it hands power over to the United Nations. You're basically saying, United Nations, you can just set the law for us in all sorts of different areas. For example, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child says that abortion has to be legal in your country. It says that you have to have a smacking ban. It says that you have to have hate speech legislation. So it's not just passing a law, it's handing over lawmaking power to the United Nations. And also the ethos around the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, it undermines parental authority and it replaces it with experts, professionals. So it pushes out parents and gives power and influence to professionals. I could talk about that lots more. So it's a very, very serious issue, a very serious step being made in Scotland. And yet, as I say, not a single MSP seems to understand the first thing about the dangers about it and the issues that are involved. Now, if you're thinking maybe, this is just some strange thing that I've dreamt up, and the reason no one else talks about it, having any problems with it, is that there actually aren't any, and I'm just imagining them. If you look at like international commentary on this issue, there's plenty of academics and campaigners saying, no, this is a problem. This undermines the rights of parents. It drives a wedge between children and their parents. So this is very well known in academic circles, but in Scotland, completely ignored, and it's just a constitutional football. Well, that's one issue that's come back into the news this week, various legal wranglings about it. And the other issue that's reared its head again is the equal pay claims in Glasgow. Now, do you remember this story? So what happened is decades ago, some women in Glasgow, they decided they wanted a job. So they looked at the jobs available, and there were jobs like grave digger, working in parks or whatever. And there were jobs like dinner lady or school cleaner. And what happened? And they had different rates of pay. And these ladies, for whatever reason, they decided they would apply to be a dinner lady or a school cleaner rather than, for example, a grave digger. Maybe they didn't want to work outdoors. Maybe they didn't want to get dirty, whatever. I don't know. But for whatever reason, they decided those were the jobs they wanted to apply for, and they're the jobs they got. Then they worked in those jobs for, 20 or 30 years. And then some clever lawyer came along and said, you've been discriminated against. You should have been paid the same as the grave diggers because they're both equal jobs, even though they're not the same job. They're different jobs, but they should have been paid the same. So the principle is that men and women should be paid the same for doing different jobs. Now, I know that's ridiculous, but that's the way the law works now. And so a large group of women sued the council on the basis of this and were successful. And they won, I think it was about £500 million. So about a third of the council's annual budget, a third of its annual budget. I think roughly equal to its education budget for a whole year. All the schools in Glasgow for a whole year, the cost of that was what was paid out to these women. Glasgow had to sell some artworks. They've had to sell some of their leisure facilities. The the buildings that some of their museums are in have had to be sold, and Glasgow City Council is now renting them back off their private owners. So a massive financial disaster for Glasgow City Council. All the politicians, by the way, were right behind the women because they thought that's where the votes were. I mean, justice, preserving public services, none of them are interested in that. They were right behind the women because there's lots of them. So they thought that would be popular. Now, I thought that story was finished, but oh no. I mean, they're at it again. This is still an ongoing issue. It seems to be now the Glasgow City Council tried to put measures in place to try and equalize the pay for these jobs. But because it took them a little while to do it, there's now a claim for during that time when they were trying to make the changes and even things up. So who knows how many more hundreds of millions of pounds might be paid out. So which political party is interested in defending public services and is interested in council finances? Well, the Scottish Parliament, when it comes to this, none of them are willing to stand up for justice and public services in Glasgow because they think it will be unpopular with too many people. And also the equal pay claim, obviously that's, it's got the word equal in it. It's a bit of a feminist cause, so no one will stand up against it. But as the Scottish Family Party, it's just wrong. It's just wrong. There is no injustice to correct. And the fact that these women have been able to claim hundreds of millions of pounds from the council and leave the council on its knees financially is just not right. Then I wonder how many of these same people are then going to be saying, oh, the local library's closed. Oh, I wish they'd spend money on that. I wish they'd spend more money on the other. Well, they need to put 2 and 2 together. You can't have your cake and eat it, as the saying goes. Anyway, that's a couple of snippets from the news this week. Right, it's now time to welcome our special guest, who is Tam Laird, who is the leader of a rival party. We sometimes have people from rival parties on this show. He's the leader of the Scottish Libertarian Party. Now, I've met Tam briefly socially, but we've never had a long chat. So I'm looking forward to a chat tonight. So welcome to the show.
Good evening, Richard, and thank you very much for asking me on. This is an historic occasion. 2 great leaders of 2 vast populist movements finally together head to head in détente.
This is the future. I mean, give it a few years. This is going to be taking place in the Scottish Parliament when Tam is the leader of the opposition.
Indeed.
So the 2 stories I spoke about there, what's your take on those? The equal pay in particular.
Well, on the equal pay thing, I recall something similar happening at Asda Walmart, where the ladies decided, the ladies who worked in the shop front decided that, they didn't like the fact that the guys who were working in the warehouse were getting a higher pay, and they took that to court. And I don't know what the end result of that was. This one I've been aware of for a long time, and there's similar cases going on round about the country. I think part of the problem is some genius decided that dinner ladies and, for example, sanitary engineers were on the same pay grade. And as soon as you say that you're on the same pay grade, then that implies that you should be on an equal pay. But it's absurd in the sense that anybody who thinks that working in a nice warm kitchen, you might get burnt with hot custard, I suppose, and working relatively sociable hours 5 days a week, and then working in a job that entails getting up in unsociable hours, terrible weather conditions. And if you look at somebody like a bin man, that's or bin woman, if you get many of them, that's actually quite a dangerous job. Not a lot of people realize how dangerous that can be. There's needles, there's bloods, there's effluent, there's batteries that can explode in your face. There's all this sort of things that you got to deal with. And I think you're entitled to be paid a little bit more for doing that than working in a kitchen. And now I can hear the ladies screaming at the screen, "You're not valuing women's work," is what they would probably say. And I guess I'm not. I think to equate 2 totally different jobs and pay them accordingly it's absurd. But I think the absurdity comes about partly because it is a public service, and when it's a public service, it's just a license to spend taxpayers' money stupidly.
Yeah. But I think we're talking about women's work. It's the work that women have generally chosen.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
There's some sort of restriction. I mean, what's going to happen here? Are we going to end up with a situation where they can't get people to be grave diggers or bin men?
That would seem logical. If you create a market in which 2 jobs are paid equally and one's easier than the other, then you're going to have a lack of applicants and a glut of applicants for the other. So that's exactly what's going to happen. And not only that, the guys who are currently doing these horrible jobs are going to say, well, why am I doing that? I'll just jack this in and try and get myself a job that's equally paid, but less hassle.
The other question I've had with this, that I probably should have done I did a bit of research. I couldn't find the answer. Let's say you were a man who chose to be a school cleaner 30 years ago. Okay, fine. Do they now get a payout?
I would reckon they would have to if it's truly about equality, and that would seem fair. I would imagine basis? So. What about somebody who just identifies as a woman, or identifies as a school cleaner? Even though they're not.
If you think about this man, though, the man works as a school cleaner for 30 years. On what basis is he being given this extra money? Because there's no sex discrimination case with him. So
No.
on what basis is he getting it?
Just on a pure discrimination case, that he's been paid less money on the grounds that they haven't valued his work the same as somebody else's. That's not equality. It's got to be like it's got to be like Cuba, where surgeons are paid the same as bellboys and taxi drivers.
But it's gender is the reason.
Yeah,
if there was no gender issue, it wouldn't be there.
Well, that'll just encourage the bloke to definitely identify as a woman then, and then that solves that one. As you know, Rich, come on, catch up. Sex is different from gender. If you haven't heard.
Absolutely, yeah. I know it's a bizarre story, and it's like one of so many things.
Yeah,
you think, how is this not a massive political controversy in Scotland?
Well, I think you put your finger on it. There's votes in it. The more free stuff, the more you promise to take. Somebody once said that anybody who promises to rob Peter to pay Paul can automatically, rely on the support of Peter. Sorry, the support of Paul. So that's what they're doing.
Yeah. I heard a statistic a while ago that the percentage of the Scottish population who pay more in tax than they use in public services is. Do you know this figure? Do you want to have a guess?
That'll surprise me.
17%.
Right. Okay. Right.
17. I suppose you've got to take into account children and retired people and whatever.
Yeah.
But 17%.
Well, remember, Scotland has a huge public sector as well.
Uh-huh.
So, and then added onto the public sector, you have then tertiary, secondary and tertiary companies that are attached to the public sector. So there's very few people out there actually making private sector money with which to pay all of these wonderful things that people want for free. Yeah.
Right, so let's move on to the first topic on our agenda. We're not being very original here. There's the topic that everyone's talking about at the moment, which is the situation with Russia and Ukraine. I've seen a little bit on Twitter from the Scottish Libertarian Party. I don't know if that was your output or not, but it gave you a flavour of the thing. So what's your take in terms of the issue itself and how we should be responding to it?
The issue itself is an issue between Russia and its former protectorate colony, whatever you want to call it, Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know exactly who is to blame. You can listen to Russia. It's no doubt that Vladimir Putin believes that he is in the right. I don't think he's sitting there going, ha, 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 I'm evil, right? He believes he's in the right. He believes that what he's doing is in the best interests of his nation and his country. And I think he honestly believes that he was under threat from an encroaching NATO from the West onto Russia's backyard. Regardless of who's in the right and then who's in the wrong in this issue, it is my view and the view of my party currently, being non-interventionist, that it has got no business whatsoever to do. It's got nothing to do with the United Kingdom. We should not be involved as a country. However, if individuals wish to get involved like they did with the Spanish Civil War and join the international brigades, if you want to saber rattle and beat your chest and fight Russians, go to Ukraine, get on a uniform, pick up a weapon, get stuck in. It's entirely up to you. If you're not fit enough to do that, you can crowdfund and you can send money to the Ukraine or to Russia, whoever it is that you wish to support. It should be no business of the British taxpayer. It's not worth one drop of British soldiers' blood, and it's not worth 1 penny of British taxpayers' money to be involved in this conflict. We've just come out of 2 years of lockdown and nonsense connected with it. The country is already bankrupt. We're in trillions of debt, which we don't seem to be in any condition to pay off. I don't see how it's to the benefit of the Scottish people, and at the end of the day, I'm the Scottish Libertarian Party, not the Ukrainian Libertarian Party. I don't see what the benefit is to the Scottish people of getting involved, which it looks like they're nudging us to do, in a conflict that doesn't concern us.
So would you oppose sanctions even?
I think sanctions are a prerequisite to war. So I would be cautious about that. If private companies wish to impose their own sanctions and no longer do business with Russia, that's entirely up to them. But I don't think it's the business of government to tell private companies who they can and cannot do business with.
Okay, let's think about a scenario there. I mean, let's say I would say Putin's ambitions are expansionist, maybe within quite a limited sphere, but it is are expansionist. Let's say we've got someone who's more of in the sort of Hitler mold, just wanting world domination. Is going
well done. I wondered how long it would take to get to Hitler, but
someone like somebody who's just going to attack nation after nation,
right?
And they want to expand their empire in every direction and impose ruthless tyranny,
right?
So under your model, would it just be that aggressor would just face one nation at a time, and all the others would stand aside while he picked them off one at a time?
To my knowledge, Putin threatens no territory of the United Kingdom or its protectorates. To my knowledge, if you can tell me any different, then that's fine. Then it suddenly becomes our business. Just like when Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands, that's British sovereign territory.
So did you approve of NATO, of a military line, a defensive military alliance?
No, I'm not in favour of NATO. Was conceived so that at the end of the day, America would never have to fight a war on its own soil. They could keep it confined to Europe. I'm not in favour of being dragged into international alliances without my consent. It may have served a purpose. I'm a Cold War baby. I served as a part of the British Army of the Rhine, less than 10 miles away from hundreds of thousands of Warsaw Pact troops. If the balloon had have gone up back then, my life expectancy was at best hours, at worst minutes. And they told us quite frankly then that we couldn't hold them. It was just a matter of slowing them up until the politicians could make a deal or whatever. I was a lot more confident in our ability to take them back then and that's not just youthful exuberance, than we are now. So even if we were, let's supposing that even if we decided that this fight was righteous and we should get involved, what in the name of God are we going to fight Russia with? I've had a look at our army recruiting video. I've had a look at the American army's recruiting video, and I've had a look at the Russian army's recruiting video. They're recruiting killers, unashamed killers and patriots, which is what you need in a war. We don't seem to be doing the same thing. So I doubt, even if we did, I agreed it was a good thing to get involved. I doubt our ability to actually have a good outcome out of it. But back to your question about NATO. No, I'm not in favour of becoming of countries joining up alliances like the United Nations or NATO or anything else. Let individuals join whatever they wish and subscribe to it.
So that's handing a lot of opportunity to the evil imperialist, then to the nation that is stronger than its neighbours, and is intent on expanding.
Okay,
it could then, so on your model, it could just pick them off one at a time.
I don't know that there's necessarily any evidence that Putin is hell-bent on expanding globally or to the rest of Europe. You could make an argument about Poland. I don't even know if he wants the whole of Ukraine. I think he wants certain parts of it to remain.
Just hypothetically.
Hypothetically, unless it threatens your territory, I'm not in favour of getting involved. I'm in favour of defensive war, and sometimes you have to make an offensive move in defence. But Ukraine isn't it for me, and it's certainly not.
Just staying in the hypothetical, though.
Okay.
So if you imagine you've got a patchwork of smallish, medium countries, you've got another country that's much bigger and much stronger than any of them.
Yeah.
And it's basically going to expand, and it's going to pick these smaller countries off one at a time. Let's say it does one a year.
Yeah.
I mean, do you not think at some point the ones left should say, we've got to unite and oppose this? I know it's not our country, but we've got to unite and do something about this.
No, I think it's best for nations to stick to their own business generally.
But they can't defend themselves on that basis. They're finished then. The aggressor wins, And that's the end game,
Well,
isn't it?
he wins what though? How all empires break up eventually. Even the British Empire broke up. And when it comes to aggressive going around the world conquering nations, we're not exactly our copybook's not exactly unblotted on that one, Richard. So I think that hypothetically, hypothetically, if you think it's a good idea to get involved in another country's business, there's nothing stopping you. As I say, get on a boat, go to wherever you want to go, and pick up a weapon and fight. But
ultimately,
yeah,
you're happy to see an empire advance by force to take
over
not happy.
Unwilling
country. Well, okay, you're willing to see it rather than to organize international resistance.
Well, it all comes down to the bottom line is, what am I prepared to go to war with my neighbour over? And I'm not prepared to go to war with my neighbour over his disputes with his neighbours. Right? If he has a dispute with me and he threatens me directly, then that's when it's my business. Before that, in a nation state, as we have them at the moment, is it the business of government to make alliances? I don't believe so. Certainly not without the support of the people. Many of these alliances that our governments are involved in, I don't have any say in them, So I don't think people should be compelled. Our sons and daughters should not be compelled by government with the threat of going to jail or anything else to go and fight for the sovereignty of another nation. Hell, we won't even fight for the sovereignty of our own nation, never mind the sovereignty of somebody else's. So we could go down the hypothetical road, and there may be at some point where I would say, okay, let's get involved, but it's not Ukraine. It definitely is not Ukraine, and it's not this fight. We can't afford it for a start, Richard.
We'll come to that. I would say, in terms of the hypothetical, I think the concept of nations uniting in order to fight off a threat that individually they couldn't withstand, I think that's perfectly reasonable. In fact, I would even say it's a moral duty in some circumstances to come to the aid of other nations.
Well, again, as long as you don't compel other people to join in your crusade, I'm quite happy for you.
That's part of what a nation is. A nation is a collective. A nation is a collective.
Well, you know that we libertarians are not very big on collectives. Certainly ones that are coerced or forced upon you. At the end of the day, my parents just had sex here. That's how it's an accident of birth that I happen to be Scottish. It could have been anywhere else. So I don't think that just because I was born here, I should suddenly be compelled to support alliances and laws that had nothing to do with making it. It's as absurd as me being born in Muirfield Golf Course, so I have to subscribe to their rules and regulations for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Let's stick with that for a minute. National identity, then.
Yeah,
I would argue that national identity serves a very important purpose.
It may well do.
It creates a sense of unity and mutual commitment within a nation. And that results in people being willing to make sacrifices for each other. And that's a really important part of what makes a nation successful, and why they're so important, and why they enhance human well-being and flourishing or whatever so much. So I think that sense of loyalty and subjective sense of loyalty and commitment to a nation is actually very important. And I think I just happened to be born here undermines it.
NATO isn't it. NATO isn't it. United Nations isn't it. There may be a case for making some sort of alliance between nation states for a specific purpose, and when that specific purpose is over with, then the alliance breaks up and you go your separate ways. But I'm extremely suspicious of when these things continue. NATO, at the end of the day, was created to fight off the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union no longer exists. Russia exists as a private entity. If it has imperialistic ambitions, that's not a good thing. But I don't think it's I don't think we help the situation any by getting involved, especially when it's nuclear powers that's involved in this thing. Mm-hmm. So I don't see the evidence that Putin is the madman that people say he is. I don't think what he did is right. I don't support it. I don't support the invasion. I didn't support the invasion of Iraq. So again, it seems to be all right when the West goes around the world invading countries and toppling regimes that they disagree with. But as soon as Russia invades and topples a regime, tries to topple a regime it disagrees with, that's evil incarnate, apparently. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. I get no idea. It's none of my business. That's the bottom line.
I think the line that trying to treat every invasion of a country as sort of morally equivalent, because the actions and the maneuvers involved are very similar. I think you've got to look at the motivation. I would say that when it came to Afghanistan, that there was good reason.
What was that reason?
Afghanistan. With Iraq, I think there's
what was the good reason?
Tricky. The good reason was that the government of Afghanistan was knowingly harboring like terrorist training camps.
That's exactly what the Russians said when they. That's exactly what the Russians said when they invaded in Afghanistan. All those years before we did.
Was it true when the Russians said it?
All right, okay. Automatically, right? Okay.
No. What was it? Was it true?
It was a government that was Pashtun. Okay. Almost everybody that had any influence and power in that government, most of the civil service were all Pashtun. So we basically went in there and we propped up a tribal government against the rest of the tribes in that nation. Again, I don't know who's right and who's wrong there. I know it was nothing to do with us. We spent a fortune on that war, Richard, and what did we have to show at the end of it?
Well, I think the problem is that you can't.
So we should have just kept
the values within a nation are very deep-rooted, and you can't just go along with the institutions of a Western democracy, put them over the top of a very, very different culture.
Well, precisely.
And expect it's all going to work out. I mean, is there any situation where you would look at the actions of a country and say, look, that was just wrong, what they did there?
Well, there's many instances where I would say that was just wrong. There's people who I know who do things I think are wrong every day. It doesn't mean I go to war with them.
Okay. So, let's think about another hypothetical situation. I mean, let's say, for example, in Norway, that some crackpot lunatic came to power in Norway, and they started a sort of genocide within Norway.
Yeah.
And they were rounding up a certain type of people, and they were being killed by the thousands.
Yeah.
And what would happen in that situation is that NATO, etc., countries would get together and they would say, what are we going to do about this? Should we intervene? Would your answer just automatically be no? That's the Norwegians' problem.
Absolutely.
But what about...
Well, again, if you want to help, there's other things you could do rather than go to war. Before you get to the point of actually going to war, how about saying, right, who are these people that are being killed by the millions or by the thousands? Let's say they're, just for example, let's say they're Jews. Okay. Mm-hmm. What you could say is, we will pay you £50,000 or £1 million for every Jew that you let come to the UK, or we let go to America, or you just let go anywhere they want. They would probably be cheaper in the long run than going to war, and it could work. So why not try that first?
Okay. Why not try that first? Okay, let's say all that doesn't work because the nutter in charge just thinks Jews are like some sort of pollutant on the face of the earth, and it's a moral duty to expunge them. So all those methods.
Well, they do. Middle Eastern countries kind of have that attitude. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you just
why aren't we at war with Saudi Arabia, Richard?
Well, just saying on this example. So there's no circumstance in which you'd say, right, we need a military intervention to stop this. Okay,
well, let me turn it around on you. At what point do you say enough is enough? Are you going to go around the world sorting out everybody that you think's an evil dictator? Are you going? What are you prepared to? You're going to spend all of your money, all of your nation's money, all of your nation's blood, the best of your people, the best of your young men, the best of your young women are going to die on a foreign soil to get rid of their problems. At what point do you say that is not in our interests?
Well, I think that's absolutely the question. That is the question.
Right.
The question is, which of these situations do you say, right, that is worth intervening, and which ones do you say it's not worth intervening? Well, your answer is automatically, it's never worth intervening. Yeah. How about this? Okay, you're walking along by the canal.
Yeah.
And you see someone fall in.
Yep.
Right. Should you rescue them, or is that none of your business?
Well, I don't know. Can you swim?
But assume you can do something. You can get a rope. You can swim. Yeah.
It is my view, because I have a personal belief system. Right? It is my view that I should. Although you haven't told me who this person is. Is it Vladimir Putin?
Well,
is it Adolf Hitler?
It's someone you don't know.
Right, someone I don't know. Right, okay. I don't think, in terms of secular society, that I have any moral duty. Okay, I think as a Christian, I have a moral duty to do that. That's me personally. So I would try and rescue them. What I don't have a right to do is try and Shanghai you into the rescue mission.
That's fascinating. So if that happened for real, if the people couldn't get it, then that's what we have, like a fire brigade or lifeboats or whatever.
Yeah.
So the government, I know lifeboats is a bad example because that's private, isn't it? Let's stick with the fire brigade. So we have the thing with the fire brigade.
Fire brigade used to be private as well, Richard. Yeah. All of these, getting this right, government creates nothing. It merely assimilates that which already existed in a private form.
So do you not like the idea of a state-run fire brigade then?
I don't like the idea of a state-run anything, Richard. Do you know what a libertarian is?
Well, I know that's what I'm enjoying exploring. So how should the fire brigade work then?
Well, it would work how it used to work. You get fire insurance.
Okay.
Right, and it's at the end of the day, if your next door neighbour's house is on fire, right, and they're not covered by fire insurance, that clearly poses a threat to your house because it will catch fire. There's nothing surer. It will set fire to your house. Then your fire brigade, your insurer insures you, and your fire brigade protects you. So it's their job to come and put out the fire.
Okay, so blocks of flats.
Well, again, you have to. If they can find some way of putting out the fire in your flat and not doing it in the rest of the flats that burn round about you, I'd be interested to know. They've got to kill the fire in order to stop the threat. Their job is to protect you. You're the insured one. Okay,
so if you're in a rural area, then it might just be your
fire insurance. Drifted somewhat off the subject here.
Well,
bearing in mind we've still got drugs to do yet. Right?
So if you're in a rural area, your fire insurance is a lot more expensive and it takes a lot longer for them to get there.
Well, I would advise that you make your own fire fighting precautions. That would be a lot cheaper in the end, to have some sort of firefighting equipment on your property. I think that would be wise. Sprinkler system.
I suppose I find this interesting. I sometimes think with the Libertarian Party, people think, the sort of anti-lockdown, anti-hate speech legislation, this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And they say, they're quite on your wavelength, aren't they?
No.
I think, well, maybe on those things to some degree, but on these other things, I mean, these are very, very radical points of view, aren't they?
Well, they shouldn't be. I mean, I don't know what's radical about not stealing people's stuff, right? I mean, like, at the end of the day, in order for the government to provide all these wonderful things that you want, whether it be fire services or ambulance services or teaching or you name it, it has to appropriate the money. The government doesn't create any money. The only money that it has is money that it takes by force from other people. So I don't see what's radical about saying the government shouldn't be allowed to do that which you and I are not allowed to do. Well, it doesn't matter if I take money out of your, threaten you, Richard, take money out of your wallet and then I go and put it in the charity tin, right? You might go, well, that's a very nice thing of you to do, Tom, but it's none of your business to take Richard's money and put it in the charity tin. So the government shouldn't be allowed to do what you and I are not allowed to do, which is take other people's money, no matter what the purpose is for.
But there should be no such thing as government then, as far as you're concerned, surely, because they've got no means of funding. So there is no government.
Well, not through taxes. You can fund it the way you fund any other thing. If you like government, you can subscribe, right? You'd be a subscriber, and you get special privileges for being a subscriber. In other words, you can vote. Why should you be allowed to vote if you don't pay in? If you don't pay into the system, why should you be allowed to vote and decide where the money goes?
But then who decides how much you have to pay to get a vote?
Sorry?
Who decides how much you have to pay to get a vote?
No, it would work similar to taxation. Only the difference between that and taxation would be voluntary. You would pay it voluntary.
Right. Well, who decides the rate that you have to pay
Well, whatever government that you put in.
Right, who put in? Only people who paid.
Right, okay. Well, we seem to be at cross purposes here, right? We're talking about in an instance where there's government. Now, you're asking me, do I want... No, I would rather have no government at all. However, the Scottish Libertarian Party retain a minarchist position, okay? Which means minimum government. Military, police, courts. That's it. Bust. No more. And even at that, on a voluntary subscription basis. America existed for over 100 years on voluntary taxation, which isn't taxation, because taxation by its very nature is something coercive and something that is put upon you. America survived for the greatest part of its time on voluntary contributions. So if the government makes it too high, then people are just not going to pay it, are they? You know, because it's voluntary.
Well, why should people pay it in any case? Why not just be a freeloader?
Well, you won't be able to vote.
Okay, well, people just, so what?
Well, all right. Well, don't pay it.
So
all I'm saying is don't expect to have a stake in the game if you don't pay in.
Okay, so someone decides...
Let me put it to you this way, Richard, right? If I have my individual rights and liberties guaranteed, okay, what care I who the government is? If they can't take my money and spend it on things that I disagree with, what do I care who the government is? Because they don't affect me. If they don't make laws that infringe on my individual rights and liberties, then it doesn't matter to me who the government is. They're merely a caretaker. They're a facilities management company. It only matters to me when the government does impinge on my individual rights and liberties. And what's worse, they do it with my money. And they do it with your money.
So the person who decides not to pay into the government, they say, I don't care about voting. I'm not going to pay anything.
Well, you're not entitled to anything that the government might provide.
Okay, so if they've got a mad axeman at the door,
yeah,
the police are not going to come.
Well, that's entirely up to the police. They're not duty. They're already not. This might shock you. They're already not obliged to come, Richard.
Yeah, but you know that they would. You know that that's what the police do. Okay, or would endeavour to do.
Excuse me, I've waited an hour. I've waited an hour for a 999 call.
Yeah, that's a red herring, though, isn't it? The principle here is that okay.
What is the principle? The police have no obligation to protect your life. You might find that shocking.
If you know that that's a dodge, isn't it?
Wait a minute. This has been ruled by the courts. They have no obligation to protect you. The only time they do have an obligation to protect you is if they arrest you. In other words, if you try to kill me and then they arrest you while you're in custody, the police have now an obligation to protect you.
Yeah, that's
up until that time, they have no obligation whatsoever.
That's a technicality. If there's a mad axeman at my door and I phone the police would endeavour to get here as quickly as they can and to stop the mad axeman coming up and chopping people up.
Well, I'll subscribe to my own private police force who will come and stop them from the mad axeman. Also, in a libertarian society, I'll be able to blow the mad axeman away with any weapon that I choose. You know, I could have a claymore mine at my front door. So the mad axeman in a libertarian society better be armed with more than an axe if he comes to my house. You know?
Oh, right, okay. Well, what about the little old lady a few houses down? She's supposed to have a claymore as well, or a submachine gunner.
She wants one.
Really?
Why not?
She's 95 years old. She's
infirm. 95 years old. Okay.
She's got to look after herself.
Well, all the more reason why she should have a gun at 95 years old, because she's not going to be able to fend them off any other way. Wait a minute. She's 95 years old, and an axe man comes to her door. Where are the police? Just waiting round the corner? When seconds count, the police are at best minutes away. What is this mad axeman doing at her door while the police are arriving? Is he just politely knocking on the door? I mean, he's a mad axeman, right? He's just standing there waiting for the police to arrive.
You believe that there shouldn't be a guarantee of a police force ready to come to the aid of this lady as best they can.
Well, their best's pretty bad. They should try doing their worst. Right.
That's different, though. That's aside from the principle we're discussing.
There is no guarantee, Richard. That's foolish to say that they would get. How could they possibly guarantee?
The guarantee is that they were going to try. They would try. Now, how efficient the police force is, that's a different question. I'm talking about the reason why the police force exists and the duty that it, well, the function it performs.
But again, Richard,
society.
I have to remind you what I said some moments ago. The state creates nothing. It only assimilates which already existed in a private form. We had private policing. Private policing exists. Private military contractors exist. Right? Private fire services exist. Private ambulances exist. So the idea that suddenly people wouldn't be able to get these services, and a lot of these private police forces actually act against people, in favor of people who are not actually subscribed to them, because they understand if that crime is allowed to flourish in that neighborhood where they do have subscribers, then it's not going to be good for them in the end.
Yeah, but then in the end, people think, well, what's the point paying them? So what happens to people who can't afford to pay for the police force and the fire service, etc.?
Well,
what happens to them?
Generous-hearted people like you and me, Richard, will chip in to a crowdfunder so that we can pay for their protection, if you really care about it.
So you're basically banking on people voluntarily contributing something roughly like the rate of taxation at the moment.
No, it'd be a lot cheaper, because like when you who would have thought it, when you get a monopoly that you have to pay for whether you enjoy its services or not, then it's more expensive than it would be in a marketplace.
Yes, I said, yeah, it would be cheaper than taxation, but you really think people are going to give those sort of sums
voluntarily, which is key.
You really think people would stump up those sort of sums to fund?
People did, Richard. We used to, right. Glasgow Royal Infirmary, Edinburgh Royal Infirmary, 7 major hospitals in London, all the good ones, the teaching hospitals. NHS or pre-NHS?
Yeah, pre-NHS, yeah.
Pre-NHS, right, okay. How did that happen without government money?
Because that was an era where I think inequality was very wide. You had a lot of extremely wealthy people, and the culture was that extremely wealthy people provided, they're philanthropists. That was the culture.
Okay.
And they provided, for
We're
people
still not
in
philanthropists. So Elon Musk gave $7 billion to charity just recently. $7 billion.
So do you really think you could abolish taxation and maintain the same level of service out of voluntary contributions?
Well, that's really not relevant morally. Let me put it into context for you. If you said to me, do you really think we'll get the cotton picked efficiently as much if we abolished slavery? Whether or not we get the cotton picked more efficiently without slavery is not the issue. The issue is that slavery is morally wrong and it's got to go. Taking people's money through coercion is called robbery and it's morally wrong. So even if we didn't do things as efficiently under a voluntary system, it would still be morally preferable.
Okay, you said when I talked about the person falling in the canal or whatever, you said you as an individual.
Got drugs to go here, by the way, Richard.
You said because of your personal values, you would feel a duty to try and rescue them. Okay, if they're the person, so that's a personal response, a moral responsibility to help a person in need that you can help. Yeah. So surely the same moral principle applies to groups of people. And if, say, someone fell in the canal and it was a 3-man job to get them out and there's 3 of you there, then the 3 of you should get organized and do it. So surely that individual responsibility extends to groups of people. So it also extends to the government. Richard. So therefore the government also has a moral responsibility.
The government doesn't. No, the government does it through coercion. The government uses coercion. It should be. It's voluntary. People get together.
It's not coercion.
You mentioned the Royal Lifeboats, right? That's a private organisation by people who got together because they all said we don't want people drowning, right? So we'll form this organisation and we'll do it. I have absolutely no beef with that, and no libertarian has any beef with that. In fact, there should be more of it.
Do you know why the lifeboats work? Do you know why it works? Because they're protecting people who've got a very expensive hobby. So there's a lot of very rich people who are particularly drawn to do that. Now, if you're talking about the drugs project in the poorer part of town, you might find this different. Just going back to taxing, you said by coercion. If we're in a democracy and the population elects governments on the basis that they're going to charge taxes, then is coercion really the right word? I mean, it is coercion in the sense that it's not optional.
Absolutely. Right. So 51% of the population, right, decide that the other 49% of the population are going to fund their projects, whether they like them or not. Are you in favour of paying for abortions, Richard?
No.
Really?
But the paying for it is trivial. Who pays for it is a trivial aspect.
No, it's not a trivial matter. They take your money and they use it to pay for abortions.
Yeah,
they take my money and they use it to pay for drone strikes in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I think
you don't have a moral objection to that.
I have a moral objection to it, but the finance side is a trivial part of it. No,
it's not, because without the finance, they couldn't keep it going. They need the money in order to pay doctor or call them what you will to carry out the operation.
Yeah, but under your system, then that would just be, well, like it is in America, like it is in England.
But you wouldn't be paying for it.
It would just be privatized.
I wouldn't be paying for it. If somebody wanted to have an abortion, they would pay for it themselves. They wouldn't force me to pay for it.
Okay, let's say we were in that situation in Scotland where there was no public funding for abortion.
Yeah.
But people could go to private providers and just pay for it. But I feel that was a great victory. I would say no. I don't.
It's not a great victory, but it's better than you saying it's not preferable to you being forced to pay for it?
I would say the moral issue, if the moral issue is like 99.9, then the who pays for it is like 0.1. I mean, it's not absolutely irrelevant, but it's trivial compared to the central issue.
Okay, are you in favour of the government using your money to teach what it's teaching in schools at the moment?
No, but again, the key, the money is
the issue. So it's a little bit now. It's a little bit more, right? And then
no. I would say the schools. I would say even the money is irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
The money can't be an irrelevance, Richard, because without the money, they wouldn't be able to do it.
But it's education policy. I believe that it's right for the state to provide education for children. I think that's a good thing.
Well, welcome to the world that you've created, Richard. Welcome to the world of state education. Do you like it?
Bad education is not an inevitable consequence of state-funded education.
No. There's no good or bad education. There is only your opinion of what is good or bad education. And at the end of the day, if you don't like the way the state is educating your child, and I wouldn't blame you one bit, then it's your job as the adult to take your child and put it somewhere where you do like the education. Okay, and I think it's a disgrace that the government forces people not only to give them the money for it, but then say, well, okay, we're going to take your money and we're going to educate your child in a way that's detrimental to your child and you. You have no say in the matter because it's not your child, it's the government.
No, you do have a say because we live in a democracy.
Yeah.
So through the democratic process, we've got to influence the school curriculum.
Yeah. What if you don't? What if through the democratic process this continues and gets worse?
Well, there's the option of homeschooling. There's independent schools.
I think that's the better option. I think you're fighting against something that's that. But okay, I'll ask you because we're drifting into education here anyway, which is I think is a good thing. Yeah. What is more effective and quicker, Richard, for the parents to get their children out of state education now before I mean, I don't say the state education system satanic and evil. I'm sure it is, but many of your supporters have used those terms. It's satanic and it's evil. Well, you keep sending your kid to the satanic and evil school every Monday. You keep taking them and shoving them through the door.
Well, that's extreme language.
Your first duty is to protect your child and stop sending it to the state school. Your alternative is, okay, let's see how many MSPs we can finally get into Parliament. So let's suppose you get all your family party MSPs into Parliament. Then you manage to get the opposition on side. Then you manage to get the teaching unions, and I'm sure you know all about them, Richard. Then you manage to get the teaching unions on your side as well and get them to implement your policy. How old is your child now, Richard?
Well, my sons are well on the way through school.
But somebody now who's concerned about their children in a state school, how old is that child now by the time you've achieved that, Richard? even with the best will in the world. 10 years, 20 years.
I think what you're saying is quite right when you're talking about someone's own children now. I mean, there are options of withdrawing from various lessons. There's the home education. There are specialist schools springing up. Independent schools are not much difference on the whole, but there are
because they have to follow a government curriculum to an extent.
Yeah, so there are options like that can affect our own children. But this is a longer term thing. I'm not just thinking about my kids. I'm thinking about everyone's kids. I'm thinking about future generations as well. Yeah. So if something harmful is going on through the state education system, it's not going to turn on a dime. No. But you've got to fight it. You've got to try and influence, and that's a long-term project.
Well, good luck with that. I mean, Martin Luther thought he could fight and influence the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church is still here, and Martin Luther had to eventually just form his own organization in the face of it. So I would love to see a Scottish Libertarian leaflet for the council elections, because surely it can't offer that the council is going to do anything. Surely it must say, if I'm elected as a councillor, the council will do nothing. We'll withdraw from everything we can and be on your own. You've asked the question, Richard. Here's the answer. What our candidates will concentrate on is, right, we don't agree, we don't like the government, right? But you've got one, okay? And you've got a council, right? Whether we like it or not, it's there. Let's get it. Seeing as you want one, right? Let's try and get it to concentrate on the basics. Let's get it to fix the potholes. Let's get it to clean up the dog crap, and let's get it to stick to doing the jobs that it's supposed to, rather than getting involved in building, art galleries and anything else. And let's get rid of the corruption out of there as well, the brown envelopes and all that kind. Those are the two things we're concentrating. Force the government that already exists to stick to its remit and not get involved in other things, and get rid of the corruption in the councils. That's what we're offering. But if you want us to offer you free stuff, no, you're right. We're the guys who are not only not going to give you any more free stuff, but the free stuff that you are getting, we're going to do our best to take it off you, because it's not free. Somebody pays. So and this is why we're in the situation we are now.
So that would include all benefits?
Well, we wouldn't start there, but eventually it would. We would start with corporate welfare. We would start with government handing out money to big corporations and businesses that don't need it. Let's have a means-tested system to start with, of where we can offer. But I don't see a problem. I don't see an issue with having privatized welfare.
Okay, so if you were the first minister of the extremely, extremely small Scottish government that you created, you're probably operating from your house at your laptop.
Yeah.
So it's exactly the way you want it.
Yeah.
Okay. If you heard that there was terrible poverty, people weren't able to feed themselves, they're living in terrible conditions in such and such a part of Scotland. Yeah. What would you do?
I would provided that was the case, and you're just not throwing the word poverty around like they do these days. But actual poverty, I mean, the people scraping around in the rubbish for food or whatever. I would organise a massive crowdfunder and a campaign that I would pay for with my own money, and people like yourself, Richard, who are clearly concerned as well about poverty, and the churches and everybody else who flaps their gums about poverty and says that they care about it, I would get them on board and get them to pay for privatised welfare.
But would you be happy with the fact that there's going to be some people who never contribute to that? They're just going to be
some people never contribute to the tax system, Richard, because they never work.
These are people very wealthy.
Well, that's entirely up to them. That's entirely up to them. I don't have to associate with them. I don't have to agree with them. I don't have to support them. But it's entirely up to them what they do with their money.
So if you've got some very wealthy people opted out, the people left have surely got to be putting more in to reach the same standard.
This is sounding like some commie gobbledygook here, but anyway.
It's not communism. It's
what to say that we should take rich people's money off them, right?
It's the whole political spectrum, apart from a tiny little bit at the end. Anyway, it's almost 10 o'clock.
Right.
That's been very, very enjoyable and very lively. You must come back on, because there's lots of other things.
I'd love to. I mean, because we never even got into drugs, Richard, for goodness sake.
No, we didn't.
That's the one everybody gives us a kicking on, especially the paternalists.
Uh-huh. What else do we have? The online safety bill, we never got there either.
No,
Cashless
it's a bad
society.
thing.
You must come back. That's been very lively. And all those people who think Scottish Family Party and Libertarians, why don't you just merge? Because surely you will. Or maybe they can think again.
Well, I think we agree on some things, Richard. So
I think in terms of the everyday political issues in Scotland, we probably agree on. In terms of, if you look at a bill that comes to Parliament, is it good or bad? We'd probably agree on almost all of them.
And at the end of the day, in a libertarian society, Richard, you'd be left alone to organise your own society the way you wish to, without interference from the government.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you very much. Okay. Thanks for watching, everyone. Watching live and watching later. So if you're interested in being a council candidate, email chairman@scottishfamily.org, and we'll see you next week. Right. Thanks, Tam. Sure enough, his logo there.
Right. Okay. Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thanks.